Wait a minute here. Wait, this is death here.
Oh, I gotta tell you, I love this film.
So Ford is coming off Indiana Jones. He's the biggest action star in the world. And he decides his next movie is going to be this thing called the Mosquito Coast, where he plays the worst person you've ever met. The character is an inventor who gets so fed up with American consumerism that he uproots his entire family and drags them to the jungles of Honduras to build a utopia. He constructs this massive ice machine in the middle of nowhere, but his grand vision falls apart and he starts losing his mind. The problem was that Ford's character is genuinely unbearable. He's a narcissist who keeps putting his family in danger because he thinks he knows better than everyone. Roger Ebert said something interesting about it. He admitted the film was expertly directed and acted, but spending 2 hours with this guy was just exhausting. And that was the whole issue right there. $25 million budget. $14 million at the box office. It's still one of the only Harrison Ford movies that's ever lost money. His agent had actually warned him about taking the role, but Ford did it anyway. And he never apologized for it. He went to the press and said he'd never seen a serious film get treated this badly by critics, that he thought they were all wrong. In 1992, someone asked him about it and he said, "Look, it's the only film I've made that didn't earn its money back, and I'm still glad I did it." Mark Harmon had just been named People's Sexiest Man Alive. He'd done a solid run on St. Elsewhere, played Ted Bundy in a TV movie that got attention. Hollywood looked at this guy and decided they were going to make him a film star. Paramount's plan was to throw him at every genre and see what worked. Summer School was the comedy. Harmon plays a gym teacher who gets stuck teaching remedial English over the summer. And he's dealing with a bunch of misfits like a male stripper, a pregnant teenager, a couple of horror geeks. He starts making deals with them. You study, I'll do you favors. By the end, everyone cares about each other and they all pass the big test. You know how it goes. The movie made $35 million. Number 32 at the box office that year, solid hit. Roger Ebert gave it half a star and said it was one of the worst films of its era, but people showed up anyway and had a good time. They clearly loved Harmon, so Paramount kept going. Action movie next, The Presidio with Sean Connery. Then drama, Stealing Home. None of it turned Harmon into what they wanted. His last shot was Worth Winning in 1989, and when that bombed, Hollywood gave up on him as a leading man. Back to television he went. And then he built NCIS into the most watched show in America. Rad is a BMX movie from 1986. Kid from a small town, natural talent on a bike, gets a chance to compete in this big televised race called Hell Track. A shady promoter rigs things against him. He has to choose between taking his SATs and racing. You've seen this structure 100 times. What made it different was the stunt work. They got legendary stuntman Hal Needham, the guy who did Smokey and the Bandit. The writing in the movie was done by real BMX pros like Eddie Fiola and R.L. Osborne. And the main character was actually based on Fiola's life. So when you watch it, you're watching real riders doing real stunts, not some CGI. The film still bombed though. $3 million budget, $2 million at the box office. And then it disappeared. Some kind of rights dispute locked the movie up, and for over 30 years there was no DVD, no Blu-ray, nothing. It has never been on Netflix or Max or any major streaming service. And that's exactly what turned it into a cult classic. The movie you couldn't have. People started calling it the greatest cult sports movie of the 80s, and half of them probably hadn't even seen it since they were 12. Judd Nelson was trying to get away from the Breakfast Club thing. He was 26 when he played John Bender, but everyone still saw him as a teen star and he needed out. From the Hip was supposed to change that. But his character is basically John Bender if John Bender went to law school. He wins some case through pure showboating, gets promoted to partner, and then gets handed something real. A professor accused of killing a prostitute with a hammer. John Hurt plays the professor, and Hurt is genuinely terrifying. The whole movie shifts once he shows up. That shift is what confused everybody. First half is broad comedy, second half is a psychological thriller. It's like two movies taped together. Nelson got nominated for a Razzie for Worst Actor. His career dropped off fast after this. The whole point of it was to stop being the Breakfast Club guy, and instead, he just stopped being in movies. Joel Coen was 29 and his brother Ethan was 26 when they decided to make a movie. They had no money and they didn't know anyone in the industry. So they shot a 2-minute trailer just to show people what they were going for, and then they took it around Minneapolis showing it to anyone who might write a check. They raised about $1.5 million from investors who had probably never funded a film in their lives. The plot is Texas noir with some dark comedy. A bar owner finds out his wife is cheating with his bartender, so he hires a sleazy PI to kill them both. The PI double-crosses him, and then everyone spends the rest of the movie killing each other based on completely wrong assumptions. Blood Simple won the Grand Jury Prize at Sundance. Joel tied for Best Director at the first Independent Spirit Awards, tied with Martin Scorsese, who was there for After Hours. Janet Maslin at the Times called it a directorial debut of extraordinary promise, and she was right. 40 years later, it's still at 94% on Rotten Tomatoes, and the Coens became the Coens. John Cusack watched 20 minutes of this movie at a screening and walked out. Cusack plays a high schooler who gets dumped by his girlfriend for the captain of the ski team. He keeps trying to take his own life and failing. The whole thing is this weird dark comedy, and the director, Savage Steve Holland, based it on his own life. His girlfriend really did leave him for the ski team captain. He really did try to end his own life. Cusack was fine during production. He saw the dailies, didn't say anything negative, but when he watched the finished movie at a screening, he lasted 20 minutes and walked out. The next morning, he found Holland and told him he'd been tricked, that this was the worst thing he'd ever seen, and to never speak to him again. Critics didn't like it either. Siskel and Ebert gave it 2 thumbs down. The studio considered it a disappointment even though it tripled its budget at the box office. But then Blockbuster started stocking it, and people went nuts for it. Holland said video stores saved the film. Every Blockbuster he walked into, it was checked out. The employees told him people would rent it and just not bring it back. So the movie that Cusack called the worst thing he'd ever seen became a cult classic. But Holland's theatrical career never recovered. After 2 more flops, he moved into children's television. Airplane made $171 million, and obviously the studio wanted a sequel. The Zucker brothers and Jim Abrahams said no. They didn't want to repeat themselves, so Paramount just made a sequel without them. Meanwhile, the original guys were trying to figure out what to do next. They loved those old black and white World War II movies, but that didn't feel like enough on its own. So they came up with this idea to mash it together with Elvis movie parodies and set the whole thing in present-day East Germany. Val Kilmer plays an American rock star who gets caught up in a resistance plot. The story is really just an excuse to throw visual gags at you nonstop. The movie made about $20 million, which sounds fine until you remember Airplane made 9 times that. And the problem was pretty obvious in hindsight. People didn't know what they were supposed to be laughing at. Airplane worked because everyone knew disaster movies. You walk in, you get the joke immediately. Top Secret was parodying Elvis films and spy thrillers and World War II movies all at once, and people just felt confused. But here's what's interesting. On Letterboxd now, a lot of people say it's actually the best spoof movie ever made, even better than Airplane. Took about 40 years for everyone to catch up. The director of SpaceCamp, Harry Weiner, saw the final cut of his movie on the morning of January 28, 1986. About an hour earlier, the Space Shuttle Challenger had exploded on live television. 7 astronauts were dead. And Weiner was sitting in a screening room watching a movie about teenagers accidentally launched into space on a shuttle. The movie itself is about a group of teenagers at U.S. SpaceCamp who accidentally get launched into orbit when there's a malfunction during an engine test. They're stuck up there with limited oxygen, no way to reach mission control, and one of the adults is injured. The whole movie is them trying to use what they learned at camp to get back alive. They pushed the movie back for months, trying to figure out what to do. When it finally opened on June 6th, that happened to be the same day the government's accident report was delivered to President Reagan. You couldn't escape the connection. People called the movie exploitative, which wasn't really fair since it had been made before any of this happened. But it didn't matter. Even if the timing had been different, that summer had Top Gun, Karate Kid Part 2, and Aliens. SpaceCamp never stood a chance. Patrick Dempsey plays a high school nerd who pays the popular cheerleader $1,000 to pretend to date him for a month. He gets popular, forgets who he is, abandons his real friends, and then learns a lesson about being yourself. Pretty standard teen movie stuff. Made $31 million on a budget of under $2 million, which made it one of the most profitable films of 1987. The cheerleader was played by Amanda Peterson, and she was 15 years old during filming. The movie made her a teen idol almost overnight. But her career didn't last long after that. By 1994, she'd made her last on-screen appearance in some film called Windrunner, and then she was done. She moved back to Colorado and left Hollywood for good. The years after that were hard. There was domestic abuse, there were substance problems. On July 3, 2015, Amanda Peterson died from an accidental overdose. She was 3 days away from her 44th birthday. This one is basically High Noon set in high school. Spielberg was the executive producer on this one through his company Amblin. The premise sounds like a standard teen comedy. A nerdy high school newspaper reporter gets assigned to write about a new transfer student, a guy who's rumored to have pulled a knife on a teacher. He accidentally bumps into the guy in the bathroom and gets challenged to a fight at 3 o'clock. The whole movie plays out in real time as he tries everything he can think of to get out of it. Spielberg watched the finished film and reportedly said, "What happened to Karate Kid?" Because that's what he signed up for. What he got instead was something dark and mean and visually aggressive, more like Scorsese than John Hughes. The tone was completely wrong for Amblin's family-friendly brand. So Spielberg asked to have his name removed from the credits, and losing that Spielberg name killed the movie. It had no stars, no famous producer's name attached. It opened on 849 screens and barely made $3 million against a $5 million budget.